Drink Tank.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Drink Tank. I'm joined once again by my buddy Plumber, and we just got done seeing Ghostbusters Frozen Empire.
Ugh.
So we're
That
gonna
was
try.
the title?
I think it was. I kept on calling it Frozen Kingdom, but I don't think that's it. So I think it's Frozen Empire. We're gonna kind of switch the format up a little bit. Traditionally, we just kind of go into like our first impressions and spoiler-free stuff, and then we continue on. I'm gonna try and break this one into a two-parter. We'll do our initial spoiler-free thing, and then after everybody's had a chance to see the movie, you know, like over the weekend or whatever, I'll put out more of our spoiler talks that way. If you're interested in seeing it, we're not going to spoil it for you until...
We're going to try not to.
Until next
usually
week.
we start yelling about something that a character did and it just evolves.
So let's start off real quick. Do you want to give us any kind of rundown on plot or characters?
So I just watched Afterlife last night.
I did too.
And it was okay. It was watchable. And so I was thinking, like, I don't like to look up any reviews. I like to come in blank if I'm going to be talking about it after. So I haven't seen any reviews, and I was hopeful.
Yeah.
The trailer. If you watch the trailer, you are not going to get that movie. So my impression, my review of it, my succinct review is There is one good Ghostbuster movie.
Yep.
It's time to kill the franchise.
I would go so far as to say Ghostbusters 2 holds up better than I recall, but I still...
Better is not good.
It's still a drop-off from the first one. I think what you said is very important, that if you've seen the trailer and you go into the movie expecting that movie, that is not the movie you get.
No, not at all.
And like I said...
It's unfortunate.
It is unfortunate. It's unfortunate because some of the things that made me laugh in the trailer did not make me laugh in the actual movie, which I found bizarre considering the trailer has a much shorter amount of time to get like its point across. And I found the story to this, again, no spoilers yet. I found it to be very meandering. I thought it was very choppy. I thought there were too many characters in the movie and not enough story to carry them. So like every time they would cut to a character beat, I was like, okay, this is useless, right? So like the older brother, every time they cut to him, did not really serve a purpose. They could have spent more time developing some of the other characters who worked.
And yet I actually enjoyed his like 2 solo scenes.
Yeah,
he was like in the first movie, Afterlife, Afterbirth. He was terrible. Like he was one of the worst parts of that movie. This one, when he was on the screen, I was like, oh, I'm fine with him. So if we're talking about the characters,
there are way too many.
Yeah, they bring half of Oklahoma dirt town with them.
Yeah, they bring literally everybody from the first movie,
almost,
except the sheriff.
We have Paul Rudd who's there. He's playing, and like he was the main character for the first half of the movie.
Sort of, yeah.
Like he had the most screen time. He had the most things to say. He had the most plot around him.
He had the most arc,
and then nothing. And the second half.
Nothing in the second half.
We had the character of the... We had the girl again, who I liked in the first movie because she was...
Yes.
She was like
Phoebe
curious.
Spangler.
She was curious. She was scientifically minded. She was cracking jokes. She was appropriately terrified.
She makes one joke in this movie.
Yes. And like her character arc is... I didn't like her in this movie.
Me either.
There were 2 characters that I liked, and one was Dan Aykroyd.
Yeah, I would say, as a matter of fact, that the legacy characters, with the exception of they try to do something interesting with Paul Rudd, and we'll talk about that in our spoiler section, but they start him with something pretty interesting, and then they're kind of like, do we need to keep developing it? And they're like, no, we said so, it's fine.
Yeah.
And then there's like, he gets like 2 beats later on in the movie that go nowhere. So if you're kind of, or like they're not nowhere, they're just, it's very frustrating to talk about this movie because there's very little I like about it, so it's very difficult for me not to just come in and tear this thing apart. I will say, on the positive side, Dan Aykroyd and Ernie Hudson get a scene together that is excellent, and I think that should have been the whole movie. I really do. I felt more in that 2-minute exchange than I did for the rest of the movie.
I liked Kumail Nanjiani.
I did not.
I know you wouldn't. When I was watching, I was like, Derek's gonna hate this character.
I do. I hate that character.
But I thought I was mildly amused with him.
Why
no
do
spoilers.
I hate this character though? Why? Take a guess. Why do you think I hate this character?
because he's just too wacky and kind of
Yes, because he's too wacky. Because something serious happens and he says something wacky. It's like,
So I liked him. Derek's not gonna like him. You're probably not gonna like him.
I didn't like him.
Because why would you like it? Why would you watch this movie after watching this review? And then so if we get through the characters, they're kind of there.
Yeah.
There's too many of them. The ones that are getting arcs aren't getting good arcs. The two of the legacy characters are they have enough screen time, and their acting was fine. Dan Aykroyd's not really an actor, if you know what I mean.
I know what you mean.
But he still does.
he has a lot more screen time.
He did his character justice.
He's exposition, man.
Right. And then then we get the cinematography, and it was so weird.
Yeah.
Like, you can't, like, I was thinking, like, what do you talk about in a spoiler-free review?
Right.
And I'm like, you got to talk about sound, cinematography, characters, and acting.
Sound
right?
was weirdly mixed at times too, because like you saw him in the trailer, like they introduced like Slimer or Onion Head, and he's in the trailer.
As Onion Head?
It was what he was called in Ghostbusters 1. They called him Onion Head. They didn't call
Okay.
him, I believe was his original name. And the audio mixing on him is to the point that when he screams, it got so loud it hurt my ears.
Huh.
And I was like, that's too loud. And there's just,
There was no real soundtrack.
no,
And you'd think there would be
just
when
callbacks to the original, like they did in Afterlife.
But when you have like, I don't know, because when you have like an evil apparition,
Right.
you would think you would give them some kind of Hans Zimmer-esque soundtrack,
Yeah,
or at
good
least
point.
a beat,
Yeah.
to overlay their menacingness.
Something operatic for that villain
Right.
would have been very appropriate.
And you don't get that for sound.
That's true. I didn't even-
I can't think of a single song. The most iconic sound in the movie was the Ecto. I want to call it the Ecto Cooler. That's just because I'm thirsty. Send me Ecto Cooler.
Well, the motorcycle
if it still
said
exists,
Ecto C on it.
If it still
so
exists, I
high
want
C.
Ecto Cooler.
Yeah.
I remember that from childhood, and I want to just
Yeah.
guzzle it. And I want to just guzzle it.
We're clipping that.
There was a there were a couple points where I felt like it was more like the cartoon, which I liked as a kid. It was more like the Saturday morning cartoon at certain points. But it was all up and down. So there were scenes where I'm like, if this were a Saturday morning cartoon and I were 11, I would enjoy this plotline.
Yeah, and I think the biggest problem for both of us in this movie was we were talking about Ghostbusters Afterlife, and we were talking about how much you liked Phoebe as a character, and you were kind of selling me on it, because I was like, yeah, it's fine, it's Egon light. And you were like, no, she's got agency, she's got impetus, she makes mistakes. And I was like, hey, you're right, this is a very well-rounded character.
You understand her emotions, you understand why she's doing things. The things that she's doing are very purposeful in the first movie. Yeah. And in this one,
our biggest problem is just the way they treat her character in this. We'll get into the spoilers of it later, but none of it.
Keep saying that.
I know, but I just because
I think we're reminding ourselves.
I am. Yeah, it's more of a coda for me. Don't ruin it for people. So if you want my review, spoiler free of this movie, don't go see it. If you like Ghostbusters, I think you nailed it. The franchise is dead.
There's one good Ghostbusters movie.
It needs to be put to rest. I don't recommend it. I don't recommend bringing children to it. They like one of the first sentences right out the gate, Paul Rudd swears. So it's like instead of saying
don't care about it.
I know, but as a parent, you're not gonna like, oh, it could be a family. And like the first thing he says is like a curse word. It's like
it's
unnecessary.
family friendly as Ghostbusters.
I don't know.
Ghostbusters
the first
was
Ghostbusters
super
is not for, but it wasn't the.
Would you like to bang me?
Yeah. It was a different time.
Maybe.
So
only if we turn into dogs first.
So I don't recommend it. Avoid this movie. We were miserable in it. I was anyway.
No, I did not enjoy it. I looked over him multiple times, and he looked over me, and he was like, pfft.
Yeah.
At one point, he feigned suicide.
I did feign suicide in the middle of the movie.
And usually he doesn't feign it.
Yeah, well, you know what? It's Russian roulette. I take my chances. So, all right, that's going to be...
Hold on. So I do want to say, cinematography, terrible. There were scenes where...
Dutch angles.
Well, it wasn't just that, but like... So they're talking.
Drone shot.
And if you move over here in front of my thing and put half your head in front of the screen while I talk... Every
Awful
single
blocking.
dialogue was you could see the back of the head and you could see the other person. I think part of that was because they had Bill Murray for like one day.
Yeah.
Is my assumption. I assumed they had Bill Murray for one day considering how scenes were shot.
Yeah.
But there were some scenes where he was in there with other characters. I was like, okay, he was clearly there. But he wasn't there. Like when he's talking to Kumail Nanjiani.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. It's cut back over and over and over. And then when Ernie and Dan Aykroyd are talking...
Yeah.
They actually do they do the same thing, but they had one cut where they're both clearly standing. So I'm like, why are you doing this when the actors are in the same room?
At least with them, they got a wide shot of them talking.
They got one wide shot, and then they did that for the rest of the conversation. Like,
You're
like
right.
this angle, like you can see both of us. We're talking. You're engaged with both of us. If Derek cuts there, and then he says something stupid and cuts over there, you know, that's like what it was, and it was so frustrating. The soundtrack, there was no music.
You're right. You said it was
the
nothing.
ecto cooler was blasting like 8 different times, and it's like that is an iconic sound from the cartoon, realistically,
Probably
because that's what I remember the most from.
Fair enough.
And then like the lore behind it was silly. I'm not going to bother with that.
Story is weak to non-existent.
So cinematography, the acting was fine. I mean, you get what you're given, you know?
Yeah,
but the acting was fine for terrible characters.
fair.
Although Paul Rudd, he could have delivered comedy.
Yeah, I don't
Instead
know
of
why I
being
didn't.
like, I'm a 60-year-old man pretending to be 40.
So, yeah, I don't recommend it. You don't recommend it.
Oh, it's...
Don't see it.
Well, overruled.